Dear Mrs. Kane, dear participants, let me express my gratitude for being here. Robin Baldeswijn, National Coordinator Against Discrimination and Racism in the Netherlands, and the Ministry of Interior and Kingdom Relations for this invitation. I'm really delighted to be here today to say a few words in my role as the EU Anti-Racism Coordinator. I'd really like to congratulate you, first of all, on your first National Convention Against Racism and Discrimination. First, but certainly not last. So we were all here today, right? Remember that. It's really a pleasure to be part of this historic event and to see so many participants representing surely different sectors coming together to discuss our common task to fight racism and discrimination and policy efforts to tackle it. Undoubtedly, it will require a whole of society approach and keeping these topics in the public debate and on the highest political agenda. This is crucial, a crucial aspect to ensure the work continues. Racism and discrimination continues to be a scourge on the whole of society. It really is an aggression against our common values, against open and democratic societies, and against the rule of law. The European Commission, of course, is very concerned with the high rates of racial discrimination, incidents and manifestations of bias-motivated violence, and the rise of far-right sentiments across the EU. And the racial abuse reported to severely affect racialized people and communities, but also other marginalized communities. It's our common responsibility to shape the society we want to live in, and to ensure that we can all enjoy and have access to the same rights, no matter which country we live in, which language we might speak, or languages, what we believe in, or the color of our skin. Racism is often deeply embedded in society's history, intertwined with its cultural norms, and reflected in the way society functions, how power is distributed, but also how people interact with the state and public services. When we begin to realize, I think really the first step is to begin to realize that the problem is not so much in people, in individuals, but in the practices and policies, legislation and politics, and the broader structures of society, we've really taken our first step towards moving towards an anti-racist society. The starting point of anti-racism policy work, therefore, must always be the recognition of structural racism. Structural racism is the most dangerous type of racism due to the silent mechanism in which it operates. It leads to people affected by racism feeling its impact in their access to jobs, healthcare, housing, financing or education, and in some cases leads to violence. With the European Commission's first anti-racism action plan, the European Commission is for the first time recognizing in its adopted documents the existence of structural racism and calls upon member states to address it in a comprehensive and intersectional manner. Structural racism can affect all areas of life, and it can affect a person throughout their life cycle. Typically, it can start at a young age and be seen in, for instance, weakened educational paths, weakened career paths, leading to a pay gap and undermining one's ability to their income level and access to housing, and therefore leading to weaker social mobility. This, in turn, can lead to overall poorer mental and physical health due to the effects of racism and discrimination. In the worst case scenario, it can truly lead to a lower life expectancy. So as you can see, the cumulative effects of structural racism and inequalities and discriminatory practices weaken equality of opportunity and leads to poorer outcomes for people solely based on their racial or ethnic origin or other protected grounds in all areas of life. So let me be more specific. If people of African descent and Black people have significantly lower life expectancy, or Roma people in their educational paths have to go through segregation in education, or it leads to people of African descent, again, perhaps not working a job that corresponds to their education level. These are all indicators of structural racism. It's not necessarily a conglomeration of individual discrimination, but systemic failure that needs to be addressed in our policy and in our legislation. So how do we make this, in a way, abstract phenomenon of structural racism visible? Data. Data here is crucial. We need to collect disaggregated data, or also known as equality data. We know that accurate and comparable data is essential to assess the scale and nature of discrimination. Also crucial to designing, adopting, monitoring, and evaluating legislation and policies. We need data disaggregated by protected grounds, such as racial or ethnic origin, but also other grounds. It really is key to capturing both subjective experiences of discrimination and victimization, but also the structural aspects of racism and discrimination. Breaking down data in this way can help in identifying the specificities of an established problem and help uncover those hidden inequities. Of course, to ensure such sensitive information is not misused, safeguards must be in place in a way that the data can't be related back to the individuals. To address this, the use of statistical categories for any data collection, really, or for the purpose of data disaggregation, should always be led by the overriding human rights-based approach of doing no harm, as proposed by the UN Commissioner of Human Rights. Doing no harm in the case of data really means that no data collection activity should create or reinforce existing discrimination, bias, or stereotypes. And the data collected should be used for the benefits of the groups they describe, as well as society as a whole. This human rights-based approach to data and its sets of principles related to participation, data disaggregation, self-identification, transparency, privacy, and accountability must at all times be respected. They're a prerequisite for progress towards data collection and need to respect constitutional norms, but also fundamental rights of individuals. Here the Commission, of course, is currently very much of the opinion that we are encouraging member states to move towards a harmonized approach in the collection of equality data. In 2021, the Commission organized a roundtable on equality data, examined obstacles to the collection of data, because we know that member states have quite different approaches to such disaggregated data, and also published a policy tool to support member states in their work on collecting equality data. So far I touched upon the awareness of structural racism and the necessity of disaggregated data. And both of these aspects are strongly linked to the phenomenon of intersectionality. An intersectional perspective deepens understanding of structural racism and makes legislative and policy responses more effective. An intersectional-based policy approach, to put it simply, is built on the premise that inequities are never the result of a single distinct factor, but rather an outcome of intersections of different social locations, power relations, and experiences. So to make it obvious, or to use myself as an example, I'm a bureaucrat working for the European Commission. I'm a woman I'm a mother. I used to be a professional athlete, fun fact, and a European expatriate that lived in the United States before. But I'm also a Black European. And all these different aspects of my life define me and shape my identity. It wouldn't be enough to just say I'm European or I'm just a woman or I'm just Black. But all these attributes have their consequences, positive or negative, but they do not come alone. The Commission acknowledged the importance of this intersectional discrimination and the need to address this phenomenon in all its equality strategies. It has offered support for effective recognition of multiple discrimination at national level by commissioning different studies and, again, encouraging with policy tools to support member states in this work. It's important, of course, to recognize that discriminated groups are never a monolith. They're never a homogeneous group. They're not affected by discrimination in the same way because of their different backgrounds and profiles and hierarchies within groups. There's a need to acknowledge additional obstacles due to compounded forms of discrimination, such as religion, class, gender, LGBTIQ status, etc. Second, tackling and framing issues from this intersectional approach will again lead to more targeted and efficient policy and legislation and meaningfully improve the situation of discriminated people as a whole. And third, with the awareness that discrimination manifests differently in many contexts and that there may be a need for specific policies to address discrimination and equality, people will really truly achieve their full equality. So I'll repeat one last time, an intersectional perspective deepens the understanding of structural racism and makes policy responses more informed. So after introducing, or maybe to the audience, repeating these three main pillars needed for effective anti-racism action, I'd like to raise one more issue that has in the recent years gained more traction, also mentioned by Robin, the historical aspect of racism. From the Commission side, we really stress the need for national action plans against racism that fit the context of the member states, recognizing each member state's unique historical roots, unique populations, cultures of remembrance, but also the challenges, the stereotypes, and the prejudices existent in that given member state. Stereotypes can be centuries old, with a tenacious hold on attitudes and a tendency to be self-perpetuating. They're often reinforced by a tendency towards social divisions that place marginalized communities in a different space from the majority population. Colonialism, slavery, and the Holocaust are embedded in our history and continue to have profound consequences for society today. We must have an honest conversation about our ugly past. This includes the way in which people with a minority racial or ethnic background are portrayed in the media, and whether they are represented at all. An independent and pluralistic media is necessary for a balanced democratic debate. Promoting balanced and positive narratives increases the awareness and knowledge, increasing the awareness and knowledge of journalists, as well as fostering media literacy are crucial ways to contribute to inclusive societies. Let me finish by saying that sometimes we tend to forget why we're all doing this work. We're doing it to change people's lives for the better, to ensure that every single person living in the EU, regardless of their race, ethnicity, gender, age, disability, or who they love, has the same opportunities and possibilities to create and live a life free from the obstacles of racism, discrimination, and hatred. As Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. said, The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. We all need to stand up to injustices. We all must have uncomfortable conversations. We're all part of the problem, and we're all part of the solution. Furthermore, to combat the structural problem that racism and discrimination is, we need structural solutions. I thank you again for this opportunity to participate today in this historic day. And I'm really looking forward to having some interesting conversations with you today. Thank you again, Robin. Thank you, everybody.
Beal, the grandson of the late Reverend Dr. Alfred Daniel A.D. King. King was the brother, A.D. King was the brother of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. You're here today with us as a representative of the A.D. King Foundation. It was founded in honor of your grandfather, and it's dedicated to the promotion of non-violent social change. I'm so happy you could be with us. Your grandmother, Mr. Naomi Ruth Power King, was scheduled to be here. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it. We're happy and honored that you came as her representative. So, Mr. Beal, the A.D. King Foundation, please take us back to A.D. King, your grandfather, the brother of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. He and your grandmother, named Ruth Barbara King, they experienced racial segregation firsthand. What lessons did they pass on to you?
Yes, thank you for having me first. My grandfather was intricately involved in the civil rights movement in the United States with my great uncle Martin Luther King Jr. also. And the greatest purpose of my grandfather's legacy, his ministry, was dealing with young people in the civil rights movement. He was very instrumental in various parts of the United States and working and organizing with young people. And the A.D. King Foundation has been formed to continue his legacy, to focus on youth empowerment. And one of the big parts of the A.D. King Foundation is the belief that my grandfather had that we all have dreams. Martin Luther King is most famous for his I Have a Dream speech that he gave in Washington, D.C. And that's something that we all share. We all should have dreams. So there are a few tenets that we stand on as a foundation. The first is going to be to believe in yourself. You have to know yourself, know your worth, and you have to dream. You have to form your own dreams. And finally, you need to dare to make that dream a reality. And that was that's what Martin Luther King's life was about. That's what my grandfather A.D.'s life was about. And that's what we feel that all humans have. You know, we have that capacity somewhere within us, and hopefully it helps someone else along the way.
Yes, and making dreams a reality, it sounds beautiful, but it's quite challenging, isn't it? What is the biggest challenge that they face in trying to realize their dreams?
The biggest one is actually just getting started. You know, a lot of times, for whatever reason, whether it's fear that we have ourselves, or whether it's oppression that we're facing from other ones, right? We don't take that first step. And there's just an amazing thing. Once we get started, you don't know where you're going to end up going. But it's important to get started. It's important to start working on it.
All right. Now, you heard Regine Bodelting talking about the challenges we face in the Netherlands with racial discrimination and exclusion. What tips, what pointers would you have for him?
What I would say first is to start working in the community. People have to realize that we are all in this together, you know, and there have been harms that have been caused along the way that I do think need to be redressed for sure. I think all countries around the world have their own struggles that are going to have to be overcome. But I think the biggest thing is to work with young people. You know, is what I would really focus on strongly. in the U.S., we still, even though we're now, gosh, maybe 60 years into our process, into our journey, and we still have a number of challenges that we have to overcome. But when you see the next generation that are now the leaders of it, and you know, Black Lives Matter and certain movements like that, I think that's where a lot of the energy is going to come from.
Right. Now, Michaela, I just mentioned that we also need to face our ugly past. Earlier this year in the Netherlands, the Prime Minister apologized on behalf of the government for the Dutch role in intercontinental slavery. The King also did that. How important are these apologies, in your view, in order for society to move on?
I think it's incredibly important. You know, until you admit that you have a problem, you're not going to get anywhere. So starting the conversation is going to be key. And I'm pleased to hear finally the Dutch government, as well as other governments around the world, are starting to admit that harm was caused in the past. Then we can hopefully look for policies that can kind of address all that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Beal. Thank you. En dan hebben we nog een fantastische spreker voor u. We zijn heel erg blij dat ze erbij is. Ze is onderzoeker, ze is schrijver, spreker en journalist. Expert in diversiteitsgerelateerde thema's. Graag een heel groot applaus voor Sahar Noon.
Goedemorgen. Ben ik goed te verstaan? Ja. Mooi, al mijn zendertje deed het even niet. Vandaar dat ik even achter de schermen een nieuw zendertje kreeg. Allereerst dank dat ik